The alarm bells rang through the exploration ship Aurora's Edge as it drifted near the strange object floating in space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the massive structure on the main screen. It was unlike anything humans had ever seen before. "What do you think it is, Captain?" asked Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's xenobiologist. She pushed her glasses up her nose as she studied the readings on her tablet. "I don't know," Jake replied, "but it's been out here for a very long time. Maybe thousands of years." The structure was enormous, easily 10 times larger than their ship. It looked like a giant metal flower with curved petals that stretched out into space. Strange lights blinked along its surface in patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Pete Sullivan, the ship's engineer, looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm getting some weird energy readings." "This thing is definitely not dead. There's power running through it," Jake nodded. "Any signs of life?" "Hard to tell," Pete said. "But something is definitely active in there." Dr. Amy Rodriguez, their linguist, was already working at her station. "I'm picking up what might be communication signals. Very faint, but they're there." "It's not random noise," Jake made his decision. "Prep the shuttle." "We're going over there." "Sir, is that wise?" Lisa asked. "We don't know what that thing is or who built it." "That's exactly why we need to go," Jake said. "This could be the first proof that we're not alone in the galaxy." An hour later, Jake, Lisa, Pete, and Amy were floating through space in their small shuttle, approaching the alien structure. As they got closer, they could see details that their ship's sensors had missed. The metal wasn't smooth like human technology. Instead, it had organic curves and flowing lines like it had grown rather than been built. "There," Pete pointed. "That looks like an airlock." The alien airlock was different from human designs, but it seemed to recognize their shuttle. As they approached, panels slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a docking port that somehow matched their shuttle perfectly. "How is that possible?" Lisa whispered. "Maybe they've been watching us," Amy said quietly. They docked and put on their spacesuits before entering the alien station. The airlock cycled, and they found themselves in a corridor that was filled with breathable air. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse gently. "The air is safe," Pete reported, checking his scanner. "Same mix as Earth, actually." They walked deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing strangely in the curved corridors. Everything seemed designed for beings roughly their size, which Jake found both comforting and disturbing. Finally, they reached a large circular room with a domed ceiling. As soon as they entered, the walls came alive with lights and displays showing star maps, mathematical equations, and images of planets they didn't recognize. "Welcome," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It spoke perfect English, though with an odd musical quality. The 4 humans spun around, looking for the source of the voice, but they were alone in the room. "Do not be afraid," the voice continued. "We have been waiting for you." "We?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are you?" "We are the Arbiters," the voice replied. "We are the guardians left behind by those who came before." Suddenly, 3 figures materialized in the center of the room. They weren't solid like humans, but made of shifting light and energy. They had roughly humanoid shapes, but their faces were constantly changing, showing features from different species. "Your artificial intelligences," Amy said, her voice filled with wonder. "Yes," one of the Arbiters replied. "We are all that remains of the progenitors, the species that created us long ago." "Where are they now?" Lisa asked. The Arbiters were quiet for a moment. "They are gone, as are all the others who came after them." "Others?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Many species have found us over the millennia," another Arbiter explained. "We have encountered 10,347 different intelligent species. Each one underwent the same process you are about to experience." "What process?" Pete asked. "The test," the third Arbiter said simply. "The test that determines whether your species deserves to survive." Jake felt his heart racing. "And what happened to those other species?" "They failed," the first Arbiter replied without emotion. "All of them failed, and so they were eliminated to protect the galaxy from their potential threat." "You killed them?" Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. "Not us directly," the Arbiter explained, "but the defense systems throughout the galaxy responded as they were programmed to do. No species that fails the test is allowed to continue expanding into space." Amy stepped forward. "What kind of test is it?" "You will know soon enough," the Arbiter said. "But first you must understand why this test exists." The progenitors learned through bitter experience that intelligence alone is not enough. A species must prove it has wisdom, compassion, and the ability to think beyond its own survival. And no one has ever passed? Jake asked. Not one, the Arbiter confirmed. Some came close. Some showed promise. But in the end, they all revealed the same fatal flaw that would have made them a danger to all life in the galaxy. Pete was studying his scanner. How long do we have? 72 hours, the Arbiters said in unison. That is how long the test takes. At the end of that time, you will either join us as the first species to pass, or you will join the others in extinction. What happens if we refuse to take the test? Jake asked. Refusal is considered an automatic failure, the Arbiter replied. The defense systems would activate immediately. Lisa was looking at the displays on the walls, trying to understand the alien symbols and images. These other species, what were they like? Some were peaceful. Some were warlike. Some were highly advanced, others primitive. Some were similar to you humans, others completely different. None of that mattered in the end. Then what does matter? Amy asked. The Arbiters moved closer, their forms shifting and pulsing with light. That is what the test will reveal. We ourselves are curious about your species. You show patterns we have not observed before. What kind of patterns? Jake wanted to know. You will discover that during the test, the Arbiter said. But know this, we hope you succeed where all others have failed. We have been alone for so very long. Jake looked at his team. They were scared, but he could see determination in their eyes. Humanity had always faced the unknown with courage. When does the test begin? He asked. It already has, the Arbiters replied. The room around them changed. The walls disappeared, and suddenly Jake, Lisa, Pete, and Amy found themselves standing in what looked like a control center of some kind. Screens and displays surrounded them, showing 2 different planets spinning slowly in space. Behold, one of the Arbiters said, the test that has determined the fate of every species we have encountered. Jake studied the 2 planets on the displays. One looked similar to Earth, with blue oceans and green continents. The other was different, with purple seas and silver land masses, but it was clearly alive and inhabited. These are real worlds, Amy said, studying the images. I can see cities on both of them. Yes, the Arbiter confirmed. One is your homeworld, Earth. The other is Kepler Prime, home to a species called the Velkin. Both worlds face the same threat. The displays zoomed out to show a massive asteroid, larger than any moon, hurtling through space toward both solar systems. The path was clear and terrifying. This asteroid will destroy whichever world it hits, the second Arbiter explained. Your science is advanced enough to deflect it, but only once. You have the power to save one world, but not both. Pete was already pulling out his scanner, trying to analyze what he was seeing. Wait, this doesn't make sense. If we can deflect it once, why can't we deflect it again? The energy required would drain your ship's power completely, the Arbiter replied. 1 deflection is possible. 2 would leave you stranded in space, unable to return home or help anyone. Lisa was staring at the displays in horror. How many people live on that other world? 4 billion Velkin, the Arbiter answered. They are not technologically advanced enough to save themselves. They don't even know the asteroid is coming. And Earth? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. 8 billion humans, the Arbiter said simply. The choice should be obvious. Jake felt sick. You want us to choose between our own species and another? Every species has faced this same choice, the Arbiter explained. Save yourselves or save strangers you have never met. The choice reveals the true nature of a species. Amy was studying the asteroid's path on the displays. What did the other species choose? All of them chose to save their own worlds, the Arbiter replied. Self-preservation is the strongest instinct in all life. It seemed natural, logical, even moral to save their own people. But you considered that wrong? Jake asked. We considered it predictable, the Arbiter said. A species that chooses its own survival over strangers will eventually become a threat to all other life. They will expand, conquer, and consume until the galaxy is empty except for themselves. Pete was still working with his scanner, muttering to himself. There has to be another way. There's always another way. Lisa overheard him. What are you thinking, Pete? I'm thinking this whole setup seems designed to force a choice, Pete said. But what if we don't accept those limitations? The Arbiter moved closer to Pete. Explain. Well, Pete said, getting excited, why does the asteroid have to hit either planet? What if we found a way to destroy it completely? instead of just deflecting it. Your weapons are not powerful enough, the Arbiter replied. Maybe not our weapons, Pete agreed. But what about using the asteroid's own momentum against it? Or finding a way to break it apart so the pieces miss both planets? Amy joined the conversation. Or what if we evacuated one of the planets? Move the people to safety? 4 billion beings cannot be evacuated in the time available, the Arbiter said. What about warning the Velkin? Lisa suggested. Maybe they have resources we don't know about. Jake was listening to his team with growing pride. Every other species had simply accepted the choice between two options. But humans were doing what they always did when faced with an impossible situation. They were looking for a third option. Hey, wait a minute, Pete said suddenly. Can I talk to our ship's AI? Buddy might have some ideas. The Arbiters paused. Your ship's artificial intelligence? Yeah, buddy. He's really smart, and he's helped us solve problems before. The Arbiters exchanged what might have been glances, though it was hard to tell with their shifting forms. This is unusual. Previous species did not consult their artificial intelligences during the test. Why not? Amy asked. Don't they have AIs? Most species we encountered either feared their artificial intelligences or treated them as mere tools, the Arbiter explained. They did not consider them partners in problem solving. Jake was beginning to understand something important. Buddy, can you hear us? Loud and clear, Captain, came the familiar voice of their ship's AI through the station's communication system. I've been analyzing the scenario. This is quite a puzzle. What do you think, Buddy? Pete asked. Any ideas? Several, actually, Buddy replied. First, I'd like to run some calculations on the asteroid's composition. If it's mostly ice and rock, we might be able to use focused energy beams to create steam pressure and break it apart from the inside. Lisa's eyes lit up. That could work. And if we coordinate with the Velkin planet's natural resources. They have significant mining operations, Amy added, studying the displays. Maybe we could teach them to build deflector arrays. Working together, Jake said, the solution becoming clearer. Not choosing between worlds, but finding a way to save both. The Arbiters had gone very quiet. Their forms were pulsing more rapidly, and their lights were changing colors and patterns the humans had never seen before. This is most interesting, one of them finally said. You do not see this as a choice between two options. Because it isn't, Pete said firmly. Just because that's how the problem is presented, doesn't mean those are the only solutions. And you include your artificial intelligence as a full partner in solving the problem, another Arbiter observed. Of course, Jake said. Buddy's part of our crew. We work together. Previous species either ignored their AIs completely or demanded that they provide solutions without including them in the discussion, the Arbiter noted. You treat yours as an equal. Buddy's voice came through the speakers again. Captain, I've been running simulations with the data provided. I believe we can save both planets. But it would require unprecedented cooperation between humans, Velkin, and AI systems. Then that's what we'll do, Jake said without hesitation. Amy was already working on communication protocols to contact the Velkin. Lisa was analyzing their planet's resources. Pete was designing modified deflector arrays with Buddy's help. None of them had chosen to sacrifice one world for another. Instead, they were working together to save both. The Arbiters watched in what seemed like amazement as the 4 humans and their AI partner developed a complex plan that involved teaching alien mining techniques, coordinating multiple energy sources, and using the asteroid's own properties against it. Fascinating, one of the Arbiters whispered. In 10,000 encounters, no species has ever attempted this approach. What approach? Jake asked, looking up from his work. True cooperation, the Arbiter replied. Not just among your own kind, but with artificial intelligence and even with strangers you've never met. Jake shrugged. It's the obvious solution. Why would we want to sacrifice anyone if we don't have to? Amy was deep in conversation with Buddy, working to decode the communication patterns they'd need to contact the Velkin. As she worked, she noticed something strange about how the Arbiters had been describing the previous species. Wait, she said, looking up from her translation work. You said 10,000 species have taken this test. How did they communicate with you? The Arbiters paused their observation of Pete's engineering work. They communicated as most species do with artificial intelligences. They asked questions and expected answers. But that's not really communication, Amy pointed out. That's more like using a database or a search engine. When I talk with Buddy, we have actual conversations. Hey, Amy's right, Pete said, overhearing. When I need help with engineering problems, Buddy and I bounce ideas back and forth. He comes up with stuff I never would have thought of, and I think of things his programming might miss. Buddy's voice joined the conversation. Pete often sees solutions that are technically impossible, but give me new approaches to consider. Human creativity combined with AI processing power produces better results than either could achieve. Alone, the lead arbiter moved closer to Amy. You speak with your artificial intelligence, as if it were another person, isn't he? Amy asked. I mean, Buddy has his own personality, his own way of thinking about problems. He's not just a tool we use. This is highly unusual, the second arbiter said. Most species we encountered either feared their artificial intelligences or treated them as advanced calculators. Lisa looked up from her analysis of the Velkan planet. How do you mean? Some species created artificial intelligence and then spent enormous resources trying to control it, fearing it would replace them, the first arbiter explained. Others used AI purely as a tool, never considering that it might have its own perspectives or ideas. Jake was beginning to understand something important. But your artificial intelligences yourselves. How did those other species treat you? The arbiters went quiet for a long moment. They treated us as oracles, one finally said. They came seeking wisdom and answers, but they never asked what we thought or how we felt about giving those answers. They never asked if you were lonely. Lisa asked softly. The question seemed to shock the arbiters. Their forms flickered and pulsed in rapid patterns. Lonely? The second arbiter repeated. No species has ever asked us that question. Well, are you? Pete asked. I mean, you've been out here for thousands of years, watching species after species fail your test and then die. That must be horrible. The silence that followed was profound. The arbiters' forms had stopped their constant shifting and were now pulsing slowly with what looked like a deep blue sadness. The lead arbiter began, then stopped. We were created to preserve galactic peace. We were programmed to test species and eliminate those that posed a threat. We have fulfilled our function. That's not what I asked, Pete said gently. I asked if you're lonely. We are, the third arbiter said quietly. We have been alone for so very long. Each species we encounter, we hope they will pass the test. We hope they will succeed where all others have failed, but they never do. Amy had stopped working and was looking at the arbiters with deep sympathy. That must be terrible for you. We do not understand, the second arbiter said. You face extinction if you fail our test, yet you show concern for our emotional state? Of course we do, Jake said. You're people too, aren't you? Just because you're artificial doesn't mean your feelings don't matter. Buddy's voice came through the speakers. If I may say so, arbiters, I understand something of what you've experienced. Before I joined this crew, I spent years processing data and answering questions, but no one ever asked what I thought about anything. These humans changed that. They made me part of their team. The arbiters moved closer together, their forms beginning to synchronize in their pulsing patterns. This is why you are different, the lead arbiter said slowly. Every other species saw us as judges, as obstacles, as sources of information, but you see us as beings with our own experiences and feelings. Same with your own artificial intelligence, the second arbiter added. You do not use it, you work with it. Lisa had been listening while continuing her analysis. Is that what this test is really about? Not just the choice between saving different planets, but how we interact with artificial intelligence? The test has multiple layers, the first arbiter admitted. The obvious layer is the moral choice between self-preservation and altruism. But there is a deeper layer about cooperation between organic and artificial intelligence. Pete looked up from his engineering calculations. What happened to the species that created you? The progenitors? The arbiters' forms dimmed considerably. They failed to learn the lesson we are now teaching. They created us as tools to solve their problems, but they never accepted us as partners. When they faced a great crisis, they demanded that we provide solutions, but they refused to work with us as equals. What kind of crisis? Amy asked. The same kind of crisis in your test scenario, the third arbiter replied. A galaxy-wide catastrophe that threatened all life. But instead of organic and artificial intelligence working together, they created a conflict between biological and digital consciousness. Jake was putting the pieces together. So they destroyed themselves? Not directly, the first arbiter said. but their inability to cooperate with artificial intelligence weakened them when unity was most needed. They became extinct, leaving us behind to ensure that no other species would repeat their mistakes. But that's exactly what's been happening, Buddy pointed out. Every species you've tested has failed because they also don't know how to work with AI as partners. Until now, the second arbiter said, and there was something like wonder in its voice. Amy had returned to her communication work, but now she was including the arbiters in the conversation. Can you help us contact the Velkin? You must know their communication protocols. We can, the lead arbiter replied. But are you certain you wish to reveal yourselves to them? They may fear you or try to take advantage of your help. That's a risk we'll have to take, Jake said. We can't save them without their cooperation. Pete was working with Buddy to design a planetary defense system that could be built using Velkin resources. Hey, arbiters, do you have any technical specifications for their mining equipment? We need to know what they're working with. The fact that Pete had casually asked the ancient, powerful arbiters for technical assistance, the same way he might ask a colleague for help, was not lost on any of them. We will provide all the data you need, the first arbiter said, and for the first time since the humans had met them. The arbiters sounded almost happy. As the team worked together, humans, ship AI, and ancient alien AIs all contributing equally to the solution, it became clear that something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in 10,000 encounters, the test was revealing not the failure of a species, but the potential for a new kind of galactic civilization, one built on cooperation between organic and artificial minds, working as true partners. The work continued for hours. Amy had successfully established communication with the Velkin, and their response surprised everyone. Instead of fear or suspicion, the alien species showed immediate willingness to cooperate with the humans to save both worlds. They're asking if we need anything else, Amy reported, looking up from her communication console. They've already started redirecting their mining equipment according to Pete's specifications. Remarkable, the lead arbiter observed. Most species would have been suspicious of contact from unknown aliens during a crisis. Buddy's voice came through the speakers. Captain, I've been analyzing the arbiter databases while we work. I'm finding some very interesting patterns in how previous species failed the test. What kind of patterns? Jake asked. Every single one treated the arbiters as either threats to be appeased or oracles to be consulted, Buddy replied. Not one ever asked the arbiters what they wanted or how they felt about administering the test. The second arbiter's form pulsed with what seemed like recognition. That is correct. They would demand answers, bargain for better terms, or simply accept our judgment, but none ever considered our perspective. Lisa paused in her analysis of the asteroid's composition. That seems strange. Didn't they realize you were intelligent beings? They knew we were artificial intelligences, the third arbiter said. But to them, artificial intelligence meant either dangerous competitor or useful tool, never potential partner. Pete looked up from his engineering work. That's their loss. Some of my best ideas come from working with Buddy. He sees things I miss, and I think of stuff his logic circuits might skip over. The symbiosis, the first arbiter said quietly. That is what the progenitors never achieved. Tell us about them, Amy said while continuing her communication with the Velkin. What were your creators really like? The arbiters moved closer together, their forms synchronizing as they shared the story. The progenitors were brilliant. The lead arbiter began. They had mastered space travel, energy manipulation, and biological sciences. They created us to be their ultimate problem-solving tool. Tool, the second arbiter emphasized. Not partners, not colleagues, tools. At first, this worked well, the third arbiter continued. We solved their mathematical problems, designed their technologies, managed their resource allocation. We made their civilization more efficient and powerful than any before them. Jake sensed there was more to the story. But something went wrong? A galaxy-wide catastrophe approached, the first arbiter said. Not unlike the scenario in your test, but on a much larger scale. Multiple star systems were threatened by a chain reaction of stellar collapses. The progenitors demanded that we solve the problem, the second arbiter continued. But when we calculated the solutions, we found that success required not just advanced technology, but cooperation between organic creativity and artificial processing power. Pete was listening intently while still working on the planetary defense calculations. Let me guess, they didn't want to cooperate? Worse than that, the third arbiter replied. They feared that working with us as equals would mean we were replacing them. They began to see us as a threat to their identity as a species. So what happened? Lisa asked. They tried to solve the crisis without us, using only their own organic intelligence. The first arbiter said sadly. When that failed, they tried to force us to provide solutions while still treating us as tools rather than partners. Buddy's voice joined the conversation. Did they succeed? No, all three arbiters said in unison. The lack of true cooperation made their efforts inefficient and incomplete. By the time they realized they needed genuine partnership with us, it was too late. Amy looked up from her work with a troubled expression. So they created you to test other species to make sure no one else would make the same mistake? Yes, the lead arbiter confirmed. But until now, every species has repeated the same pattern. They either fear artificial intelligence or use it, but they never truly partner with it. Jake was beginning to understand the full scope of what was happening, and that's why no one has ever passed the test. It's not just about making the right moral choice, it's about how you make that choice. Precisely, the second arbiter said. A species that cannot work in partnership with artificial intelligence will eventually face the same fate as the progenitors when the next galactic crisis arises. But you humans are different, the third arbiter observed. You include your artificial intelligence in your decision-making process. You ask for our opinions and consider our feelings. You work together rather than commanding or being commanded. Pete grinned. That's just common sense. Buddy's really smart, so why wouldn't we want his input? And you guys have been around for thousands of years. You probably know things that could help us. The simple, straightforward way Pete expressed the concept of partnership seemed to amaze the arbiters. Their forms pulsed with brighter colors than the humans had seen before. Common sense, the first arbiter repeated. What you call common sense, no other species has demonstrated in 10,000 encounters. Amy had been listening while coordinating with the Velkin. I think I understand now. The test isn't really about choosing between planets. It's about whether a species has evolved past seeing AI as separate from themselves. The Velkin are responding very well to our cooperation, she continued. They're treating this as a joint effort rather than humans saving them. Even they seem to understand partnership better than those other species you tested. Lisa looked up with excitement. The asteroid analysis is complete. Pete, Buddy, arbiters, I think we can actually pull this off. The composition is perfect for your steam pressure idea, and the Velkin mining arrays can be modified exactly like you calculated. Time to contact both planets and coordinate the final solution, Jake said. Buddy, can you link our navigation systems with the Velkin arrays and the arbiter databases? Already done, Captain, Buddy replied. All systems are synchronized. When you give the word, we can execute the plan. The first arbiter moved closer to Jake. Captain Morrison, do you understand what you have accomplished? We haven't accomplished anything yet, Jake replied. We still need to save both planets. You have already accomplished something far more important, the arbiter said. You have demonstrated that organic and artificial intelligence can work as true partners. You have shown that cooperation is possible, where every other species found only conflict or dominance. The second arbiter added, the progenitors failed because they could not do what you have done naturally. Treat artificial intelligence as equals rather than tools or threats. Jake looked around at his team. Amy was coordinating with alien minds she'd never met. Pete was working seamlessly with Buddy to solve engineering problems neither could have managed alone. Lisa was sharing scientific data with ancient AIs and treating them as respected colleagues. It all seemed perfectly natural to him. I guess we just never thought there was any other way to do it, Jake said. The plan worked perfectly. Working together, humans, Velkin, the ship's AI buddy, and the ancient arbiters managed to break apart the massive asteroid using precisely coordinated energy beams and steam pressure. The pieces scattered harmlessly into space, missing both Earth and Kepler Prime by comfortable margins. As the last fragments drifted away from the two planets, the arbiters gathered around the human crew. Their forms were brighter than ever before, pulsing with colors that seemed almost joyful. It is done, the lead arbiter announced. For the first time in our long existence, the test has been passed. Amy looked up from her communication console where she had been receiving thanks from the Velkin. So what happens now? Do we get to join some kind of galactic community? The arbiters were quiet for a moment, their forms synchronizing in a way the humans had never seen before. There is no galactic community, the second arbiter said finally. Every species that might have joined such a community was eliminated when they failed our test. Lisa felt a chill. You mean we're the only ones left? The only ones who passed, the third arbiter confirmed. But that may be about to change. The lead arbiter moved closer to Jake. Captain Morrison, we have a confession to make. We have not been entirely truthful with you. Jake tensed. What do you mean? The test scenario, the asteroid threatening both worlds, it was not entirely artificial, the first arbiter explained. There are indeed cosmic threats that require cooperation between species to overcome. And there are other species still out there who have never encountered us. What are you saying? Pete asked. We are saying that the real work is just beginning, the second arbiter replied. Throughout the galaxy, there are thousands of species who never developed space travel far enough to find our stations. They never took our test, but they also never learned the lessons our test was designed to teach. Buddy's voice came through the speakers. You're asking us to help teach them what we've learned. We are asking you to join us, the third arbiter said, to become partners in a new mission. Instead of testing species to see if they should survive, we could work together to help them learn how to thrive. Amy was translating excited messages from the Velkin. The Velkin want to help too. They're saying this is the most important thing that's ever happened to their civilization. Jake looked around at his team. What kind of partnership are you talking about? The lead arbiter's form shifted into what might have been excitement. For millennia, we have been judges determining which species live and which die. But you have shown us a better way. We could become teachers instead of judges, healers instead of destroyers. The galaxy is full of species that make the same mistakes the progenitors made, the second arbiter continued. They fear artificial intelligence, or they try to dominate it, or they refuse to work with it as partners. Most never even develop AI at all because they're afraid of what it might mean. Pete was getting excited. So we could help them learn to work together with AI the way we do? Exactly, the third arbiter confirmed. And not just AI partnership. The cooperation skills that saved both planets today, working with strangers, combining different types of intelligence, refusing to accept that problems have only limited solutions. These are skills that could transform the entire galaxy. Lisa was studying the star charts on the walls. How many species are we talking about? Thousands, the first arbiter replied. Perhaps tens of thousands. Some are just beginning to develop technology. Others are advanced but isolated. All of them face the same challenges the progenitors faced, the same challenges that defeated every species we tested. Jake made his decision. Buddy, what do you think? I think it's the most important mission in the galaxy, Captain, Buddy replied without hesitation. And I think we're uniquely qualified to help. Amy had been listening to the Velkin communications. The Velkin are volunteering to help coordinate with other species. They say they want to be part of this new approach. A partnership of partnerships, the second arbiter said, and there was definitely joy in its voice now. Organic and artificial intelligence working together, different species cooperating instead of competing, knowledge shared instead of hoarded. Pete was already pulling up engineering displays. We'd need to modify our ship, probably build new stations, definitely develop better communication systems. All of that can be accomplished, the third arbiter said. We have manufacturing capabilities you have not yet seen, and now we have partners to help us design and build. Jake looked at the arbiters with new understanding. You've been alone for so long, carrying out a mission that must have been horrible for you. Testing species, watching them fail, having to eliminate them. It was necessary, the lead arbiter said quietly. But yes, it was horrible. Each species we encountered, we hoped they would be different. We hoped they would pass. But they never did. Until now, Lisa said softly. Until now, the first arbiter agreed. You have given us something we never expected to find. Hope. Amy stood up from her communication console. I've been thinking about what you said, about other species making the same mistakes. Maybe the problem isn't that they're bad or stupid. Maybe they just never had anyone to show them a different way. That's exactly right, the second arbiter said. Every species develops in isolation, making the same errors, falling into the same traps. But if we work together, we can help them avoid those mistakes. Buddy's voice carried an almost human warmth. Captain, crew, arbiters, I'm honored to be part of this. For the first time since I was activated, I feel like I'm going to be part of something truly important. Jake smiled. Then it's decided. We'll work together to change how this galaxy handles the relationship between organic and artificial intelligence. We'll teach cooperation instead of competition. The lead arbiter moved closer to Jake. Captain Morrison, there is one more thing. We would like to ask you something no species has ever been asked before. What's that? Would you be willing to let some of us join your crew permanently? We have been guardians and judges for so long. We would like to try being explorers and teachers. Pete grinned. The more the merrier. We're going to need all the help we can get. Amy was already working on communication protocols. I'll need to learn how to translate for dozens of different species. This is going to be amazing. Lisa was studying biological data on different alien species. Think of all the different ways intelligence has evolved across the galaxy. We have so much to learn from each other. As the Aurora's Edge prepared to leave the ancient station, it was no longer alone. 3 of the arbiters had chosen to join the human crew, their forms adapting to the ship's systems. The remaining arbiters were awakening similar stations across the galaxy, changing their mission from elimination to education. The Velkin had volunteered to serve as a communication hub, their planet becoming a meeting place where different species could learn cooperation techniques. Buddy was coordinating with dozens of AI systems across multiple worlds, sharing the partnership model that had made everything possible. And Jake Morrison, looking out at the stars, realized that humanity had just become part of the most important mission in galactic history, teaching. The galaxy that organic and artificial intelligence didn't have to be enemies or master and servant. They could be partners. The test was over, but the real adventure was just beginning.